The first day I brought Daniel into the office, he looked completely out of place. Wearing an oversized shirt, a borrowed tie, and shoes that didn't quite match, he followed me through the lobby with the wide-eyed silence of someone who wasn't sure if he belonged. I remember the receptionist giving me a curious glance as we passed. He nodded at her awkwardly. She didn't nod back. "Relax," I told him. "You're here now." I introduced him to the warehouse team first. Let him start at the bottom. No special treatment, no titles, just a clipboard, a vest, and the floor. He didn't complain, didn't flinch. He worked like someone who'd never had a real chance before. And maybe back then that's exactly what he was. Because not long ago, Daniel had been a nobody. He was my cousin. Well, second cousin to be exact. His mom, my aunt, had died suddenly of a stroke just a few months before. At 24, Daniel was barely getting by, working night shifts at a packaging plant, sleeping on a friend's couch and trying to hold his world together with duct tape and pride. He had no degree, no real resume, and nowhere to go. When I found out, I didn't hesitate. I'd known him as a kid. He used to follow me around at family reunions, tugging on my sleeves, asking me what I did, how I worked. There was a moment I never forgot. I was maybe 15, scraped my knee in the gravel playing soccer, and while everyone else laughed or ignored it, Daniel, only 10 then, offered me his snack and said, "You can have mine. I'm not hungry." Maybe that's why, years later, when I saw him standing alone at his mother's funeral, I felt something tighten in my chest. And maybe that's why I brought him home. At the time, my wife wasn't thrilled. Ava always had a sharper eye for people than I did. "He's a good kid," I said. "I hope he stays that way," she replied. As for me, my name's Ethan Vance. I'm the founder and president of VanceTech Medical Distributors. I started this company 15 years ago with nothing but a borrowed van and a handful of local clients. We ship high-precision medical equipment to hospitals across the region. It's not glamorous work, but it matters. Every machine we deliver might save a life. That means something to me. And at that moment, it meant something to Daniel, too. Or so I believed. At first, it was nothing, just little things. A shipment went out without the usual paperwork. A client emailed me directly asking about a discount I didn't authorize. Then came the quarterly reports, and I noticed something strange. Some of our top accounts had dramatically reduced their orders, but I hadn't received any complaints. No issues flagged, no service calls, just silence. I called Daniel into my office one afternoon. "Anything unusual going on with the client accounts?" I asked casually. He leaned back, confident, too confident. "Nothing serious," he said, "just budget delays. Their purchasing team is restructuring. I've got it under control." I wanted to believe him. I did believe him. Daniel had been with us for over 5 years by then. He had risen through the ranks because he delivered. He handled negotiations with ease, knew how to charm even the toughest procurement officers, and never once missed a quota. He was like a younger version of me, only smoother. Still, something didn't sit right. The numbers kept slipping, but only in the accounts he personally managed. And every time I tried to dig deeper, there was always a convenient explanation. I told myself it was just a rough quarter. The industry was shifting. We'd bounce back. But then one Friday evening, my phone buzzed with an anonymous message. No name, no subject line, just a single line of text. "Check who's really fulfilling the client orders." Attached was a PDF, an invoice from a company I didn't recognize. The product codes matched ours exactly. The item descriptions were word for word from our internal catalog. The prices, identical, but the sender? A business I'd never heard of, NCD MedTech Solutions. I felt a chill crawl down my spine. I printed the invoice, studied it under the office light, and stared at the delivery address. It was a warehouse in the next city over. not one of ours, not a known distributor. The next morning I got in my car and drove there myself. What I found changed everything. The building was newer than I expected. Gray aluminum siding, tinted windows, a discreet loading bay. Clean, professional. And above the wide entrance, a sign in bold blue letters read exactly what the invoice had shown me. NCD MedTech Solutions. My stomach dropped. I parked across the street and watched from my car. Two men unloaded boxes from a truck. Boxes that looked suspiciously like ours. White labels, familiar barcodes, the same packaging tape we used. They rolled them into the bay like it was just another day in business. But I had never heard of NCD. And yet, I had. The initials hit me like a hammer. NCD, Nathaniel Cousin Daniel. It was a nickname from when we were kids. He used to sign his drawings that way. NCD was here. This wasn't coincidence. I drove back in silence, 1,000 questions clawing at my mind. That evening I didn't eat. I didn't speak to Ava. I stayed up reading through every client contract Daniel had touched in the past year. Suddenly the missing numbers made sense. The subtle shift in loyalty, the unexplained drops in volume. He wasn't losing clients. He was redirecting them to himself. By Monday morning, I was waiting in my office when Daniel walked in, coffee in hand, smiling like any other day. "Close the door," I said. He paused, sensing the shift in my voice, then slowly shut it behind him. I slid the printed invoice across the desk. His eyes scanned it, just briefly. Then he looked up. There was no panic, no denial, just a slow, exasperated sigh. "You weren't supposed to find out like this," he muttered. "Is this your company?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. He nodded. "It is." My voice cracked. "I gave you everything." Daniel leaned forward, calm and cold. "You gave me an opportunity. I took what I could from it. That's business." I stared at him, this man I once called family, and realized I was speaking to a stranger. Then he handed me an envelope, his resignation letter. "Effective immediately," he said with a smirk. "You should probably start checking your vendor list. It's going to get quiet." The silence came faster than I expected. Within 2 weeks of Daniel's departure, the phones stopped ringing. Emails went unanswered. Orders that had been recurring monthly vanished from the system. Clients I'd worked with for over a decade, people I'd flown across the country to meet, whose children's names I knew, ghosted me overnight. One by one, the contracts bled out. My operations manager, Kelly, approached me nervously with a spreadsheet. Over 60% of our top-tier clients had stopped responding or had redirected their purchasing contacts. The vendors we relied on for specialty components were backlogged or reevaluating partnerships. She didn't say it, but I knew what she was thinking. We were being cut off. Daniel hadn't just stolen clients. He'd stolen trust, and trust, once broken, doesn't return easily. I spent the next few weeks living like a ghost in my own company. I'd walk into the office and find entire sections of desks unoccupied, resignation emails piled up, some employees left quietly, others sent cryptic messages thanking me for the opportunity while clearly jumping ship to join Daniel's new venture. I called some of our longest-standing clients directly, tried to reason with them. One told me, "Ethan, it's not personal. It's just faster and cheaper now." Another admitted quietly, "Daniel promised exclusive access. He said you were stepping down." Stepping down? I hadn't even stepped away. At home, Ava watched me unravel. I skipped meals, stared at contracts long after midnight, trying to find some legal clause that might undo what had been done. But there was nothing. No breach, no theft, just betrayal wrapped in loopholes and smiles. One evening, as I sat in the dark of my home office, My son walked in holding his toy stethoscope. "Dad," he said softly, "why doesn't Uncle Daniel come visit anymore?" I couldn't answer. Not then, maybe not ever. The company I built with bare hands was bleeding out, and the man holding the knife had once lived under my roof. It was a quiet Tuesday when I received an email from Lina Nguyen. The name rang a bell. Vaguely. She worked at a small private hospital we'd supplied for years. I hadn't heard from them since Daniel left. My fingers hesitated as I clicked the message open. "Mr. Vance, I thought you should know. Daniel approached us with a new offer. It looked attractive at first, but something didn't sit right. I ran a comparison and found mismatched product specs, codes that didn't align with FDA compliance. I haven't signed anything yet. Figured you'd want to see." Attached was a side-by-side breakdown of two ventilator models, ours and Daniel's. His version used the same external specs, but the internal components were cheaper knockoffs. I sat back, stunned. All this time I'd believed he was just copying me. Now I realized he was cutting corners too. That same afternoon, someone knocked on my office door. It was Alex Reyes, one of our former IT associates. I hadn't seen him in nearly 6 months. He'd resigned quietly during the early chaos. "I owed you more than a silent exit," he said, dropping into the chair across from me. From a messenger bag, he pulled out a flash drive. I saw what Daniel was doing. I didn't say anything then, but I saved everything. Access logs, file transfers, vendor directories. He used internal credentials to pull proprietary data for months. I couldn't stop him, but I can give you this. I didn't know what to say. Lina, Alex, two people I'd almost forgotten, now returning at the exact moment I needed them most. Not because they had to, but because somewhere along the way I had once treated them with decency, respect, and they remembered. I looked at the flash drive in my palm and felt, for the first time in months, something I hadn't allowed myself to feel. Resolve. I didn't go public. Not yet. I spent the next 48 hours combing through the flash drive Alex had given me. It was all there. Time-stamped downloads, VPN access logs from Daniel's home IP, vendor contracts exported from our private CRM system. He hadn't even tried to hide it. He assumed I'd never look or never recover. I forwarded the files to our attorney, Karen Lang. She took one look and said, "This is corporate theft masked as strategy, and you have enough to file." The next step came from Lina. With her help, we contacted 2 hospital groups where Daniel had submitted proposals using counterfeit specs. She agreed to submit a formal affidavit confirming she had reviewed non-compliant equipment specifications. That gave us a legal angle, not just internal sabotage, but potential public endangerment. Within a week, we had drafted a lawsuit: unlawful use of proprietary data, breach of fiduciary duty, and endangerment through falsified medical compliance claims. We filed it quietly, no press, no announcement, but it didn't stay quiet for long. One of Daniel's vendors reached out to me, visibly shaken. We received notice of the lawsuit. Our lawyers advised us to halt all deliveries to NCD MedTech until this is resolved. Another followed suit. Then another. His supply lines started cracking. At the same time, I began rebuilding, not with ads or discounts, but with dignity. I called former clients personally, not to plead, but to remind them who we were. I shared our renewed compliance policy, our streamlined service plans, and our full transparency audits. Some said no, but a few, just enough, said, "Let's talk." I changed our name from VanceTech to EV Medical Systems. New brand, new logo, new mission. I rehired Alex, promoted Kelly to COO, started reassembling a team, not of survivors, but believers. One night, as I reviewed vendor letters in my office, Ava placed a cup of coffee beside me. "You're not done yet," she said. "No," I replied without looking up. "I'm just getting started." 3 months after the lawsuit was filed, the silence broke with a headline: NCD MedTech under investigation for non-compliant medical equipment distribution. The article spread fast across industry newsletters and healthcare networks. Our legal documents had reached the regulators. FDA compliance teams launched their own inquiry. Hospitals that had signed contracts with Daniel began pulling back. Some even demanded refunds. Vendors scrambled. Insurance providers panicked. Daniel went from a rising star to a liability overnight. I watched it unfold, not with satisfaction, but with quiet finality. Actions, I'd learned, have consequences. Sometimes they arrive late, but they always arrive. Then, one morning, he came. Daniel showed up in the lobby of EV Medical Systems, asking to see me. My receptionist buzzed in, unsure what to do. "Send him up," I said. He entered slowly, no longer wearing the designer blazer and smirk. He looked tired, smaller somehow, like the mask had finally slipped. "Ethan," he began, eyes lowered, "I need your help." I didn't speak, just watched him squirm. "I made mistakes. I pushed too hard. I got caught up in it all. I thought I could control it. I didn't mean to hurt you." A beat of silence. Then I leaned back in my chair. "You didn't just hurt me, Daniel. You hurt the people who depended on us. You lied to clients. You sold them unsafe products. You stole trust, not just from me, but from this industry." He looked like he might cry. I didn't care. "You didn't fall," I said quietly. "You jumped." He reached into his coat pocket. A checkbook. "I'll pay back what I can. Maybe we can undo some of this." I stood. "We're past that. The court will handle what's left." He blinked, as if finally understanding. This wasn't a conversation. It was closure. As security escorted him out, I looked out my window toward the city skyline. Daniel had tried to build his empire on stolen stone, but shaky foundations never last. And now the dust was settling. A year later, EV Medical Systems was smaller than Vance Tech had ever been, but stronger in all the ways that mattered. We no longer chased every client. We didn't undercut competitors or stretch ourselves thin. What we built was quiet, efficient, and honest. Every customer we had now stayed because they believed in us, not because they were lured by discounts or false promises. Daniel's company dissolved 6 months after the lawsuit concluded. He was fined, publicly sanctioned, and banned from future government or hospital contracts. Word spread quickly. No one wanted to work with someone who had once gambled with human lives for profit. I never saw him again. He left the city, I heard, moved west, started over under another name, maybe. It didn't matter. What mattered was that I never let him turn me into him. There were days when I wanted revenge, something harsh, public, satisfying, but I chose better. Because if all this had taught me anything, it was that integrity isn't just about doing the right thing when people are watching. It's about doing it when they aren't, when no one will ever know. One night, as I locked up the office, my son stood by the door with his backpack slung over his shoulder. He was older now, old enough to start understanding the world and the people in it. "Dad," he asked, "was Uncle Daniel a bad guy?" I paused. "No," I said. "He made bad choices, but once he was just someone trying to be seen." He nodded slowly. "Would you ever help him again?" I looked at him for a long moment. "Maybe," I said, "but not in the same way." He didn't ask more. As we walked to the car, I looked up at the EV Medical sign, my initials, and realized something. I hadn't just rebuilt a business. I had rebuilt my boundaries. I had rebuilt my peace. and most of all, I had rebuilt myself.